The night had fallen over the city with an unusual stillness, the kind of silence that seemed to arrive only when a story was approaching its most painful truth. Beyond the towering windows of the CEO's penthouse office, countless lights shimmered through the darkness, but none of them could compete with the single photograph resting on his desk. It was old, slightly damaged around the edges, and almost painfully familiar. He had looked at that photograph so many times that he no longer needed to see it to remember every detail. The person beside him in the picture was smiling, unaware that years later that smile would become the one thing he would spend everything to find again. Everyone had told him to accept the past. Everyone had insisted that the disappearance was over, that the memories were gone, and that whatever relationship had existed between them belonged to another life. But he had never believed it. Somewhere inside him, beneath the wealth, power, reputation, and cold confidence that had made him one of the most feared executives in the business world, there remained a single unanswered question. Where had she gone, and why had everyone around him worked so hard to make him believe she was never coming back? For years, the CEO had built his entire life around control. Contracts were controlled. Companies were controlled. Investments were controlled. Even the people closest to him had learned not to challenge his decisions. Yet there was one thing he had never been able to control: the memory of the woman who had disappeared from his life without giving him a chance to understand why. He remembered fragments rather than complete moments. A quiet conversation beneath an old tree. A familiar voice calling his name when he was exhausted. A promise that had never been properly completed. And above everything else, he remembered a necklace. It was not expensive in the way the jewelry displayed inside his family's private collection was expensive. It was valuable because it carried a history that nobody wanted him to remember. A small pendant, passed through generations, connected to a secret that had been buried long before either of them understood its meaning. He had seen that necklace only briefly years earlier, but its image had remained trapped inside his mind like a message waiting to be decoded. Then, on an ordinary evening that suddenly became anything but ordinary, everything changed. A private investigator whom the CEO had trusted for years arrived at the office carrying a single folder. There was no dramatic announcement, no warning, no attempt to soften what was inside. The investigator simply placed the folder on the desk and remained silent. The CEO opened it expecting another dead end. Instead, he found a photograph that made the entire room seem to disappear around him. The woman standing in the picture looked different. Her expression was calmer, her hair had changed, and there was a strange uncertainty in her eyes, but he knew her immediately. There are moments when recognition does not come from logic. It comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere untouched by time. His hand tightened around the photograph as he stared at her face. She was alive. She had been living under another identity in another place, far away from the people who had spent years telling him that she could never return. But there was something else in the photograph. Around her neck was the necklace. The same necklace. The discovery shattered the final wall of doubt he had built around himself. He did not wait for explanations. He did not ask whether the information had been verified again. He simply stood, took his coat, and walked out of the office with a determination that even his closest employees had never witnessed before. For years he had been searching for answers, but now the answers had a face. The journey to find her had ended, but the real mystery was only beginning. Why did she not remember him? Who had changed her identity? Why had the necklace remained with her? And why had members of his own family seemed terrified whenever the past was mentioned? The woman had been living quietly, unaware of the storm surrounding her existence. She knew very little about the years before her accident. Her memories came in scattered pieces, sometimes appearing in dreams and disappearing moments after she woke. She remembered a large house. She remembered a voice. She remembered standing beneath bright lights while someone called her name. But whenever she tried to connect those memories, pain and confusion filled the gaps. The people around her had told her not to force herself to remember. They had said the past was dangerous and that forgetting had protected her. She had believed them because she had no reason not to. Until the necklace began to change everything. She had always worn it without knowing why. It had been given to her after the accident, according to the family who had cared for her. They claimed it was the only personal object found with her. But recently, whenever she touched the pendant, strange memories had begun appearing. Not complete memories, but flashes. A hallway. A young man standing at the end of it. A family portrait. A locked room. Someone arguing in a low voice. A document being torn apart. And then a final image that frightened her more than anything else, a car disappearing into the rain. She had no idea that the same night had been haunting the CEO for years. When he finally saw her in person, he stopped several steps away. After everything he had imagined, he had expected some enormous emotional moment, some dramatic recognition that would instantly restore the missing years. Instead, she simply looked at him with uncertainty. There was no recognition in her eyes. No sudden smile. No immediate memory. The woman he had spent years searching for was standing directly in front of him, yet she looked at him like a stranger. That was the moment he understood how complicated the truth would be. He wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to explain the past, the promises, the people who had lied, and the years he had spent looking for her. But he also realized that forcing memories upon someone who had lost them would only create another kind of pain. So he stood there quietly and allowed her to decide whether she wanted to hear the truth. She touched the necklace without realizing that he had noticed it. His eyes immediately fell upon the pendant. She saw his reaction and asked why he was looking at it. He could barely answer. That necklace had once belonged to his mother. The revelation changed the entire situation. According to the family records, the necklace had disappeared years ago. His mother had always said it was stolen during a period of conflict inside the family. Yet now it was around the neck of the woman everyone believed had vanished from his life. Suddenly, the disappearance no longer looked like an accident. It looked planned. The CEO returned to his family home that night with questions he had been afraid to ask for years. His father was waiting in the library, surrounded by old documents and photographs. The moment he saw the necklace in his son's hand, the color drained from his face. That reaction told the CEO more than any confession could have. His father knew. There had always been a secret inside that house. A secret protected by money, influence, fear, and silence. The CEO demanded the truth. His father refused. He said some memories should remain buried because bringing them back would destroy everyone. But the CEO had spent too many years living with unanswered questions. He no longer cared whether the truth damaged the family name. He wanted to know why the woman he loved had disappeared and why she had been left without the memories of the life they once shared. Then another family member entered the room. His aunt. She had always been considered the gentle member of the family, the person who avoided conflict and stayed away from business matters. Yet when she saw the necklace, she began to cry. Not quietly, but with the helpless expression of someone who had been carrying guilt for far too long. She admitted that the necklace had never been stolen. It had been deliberately given away. Years earlier, a conflict over the family company had divided the household. Certain relatives believed the CEO was becoming too powerful and feared that his relationship with the woman would eventually connect her to the family's inheritance. There had been arguments, secret agreements, manipulated documents, and threats disguised as warnings. Someone had decided that separating the two of them would solve the problem. The aunt had witnessed part of it. She had been too afraid to stop it. She had watched the woman leave that night, believing that she would eventually return. Instead, an accident occurred, and the woman lost her memories. The people responsible saw the accident as an opportunity to erase the remaining connection. They changed records. They concealed evidence. They convinced everyone that the woman had disappeared permanently. But they made one mistake. They allowed the necklace to survive. The pendant contained a tiny inscription inside it, something the woman had never noticed. It was not merely a family symbol. It was connected to an old safe deposit arrangement established by the CEO's mother. Inside that arrangement were documents proving that the family company had been manipulated through hidden transfers and falsified agreements. Suddenly, the mystery of the missing woman and the mystery of the family's financial secrets became the same story. The CEO returned to the woman with the truth slowly unfolding around him. He told her that her memories did not need to return all at once. He told her that she had the right to be frightened, confused, or angry. He did not ask her to become the person she had been before. He simply wanted her to know that the life she had forgotten had been real. She listened in silence. Then she asked the question he had feared most. If she could never remember him, would he still remain? He had no perfect answer. The years had taught him that love could not erase trauma, and money could not repair lost time. He could not promise that memories would return. He could not force the past to become the present. All he could do was tell her that her choice mattered more than his expectations. That answer affected her more deeply than any dramatic confession could have. That night, she slept with the necklace beside her. For the first time in years, her dreams were different. She saw the old house again. She saw the garden. She saw the young CEO before wealth had transformed him into the guarded man everyone feared. She remembered a conversation beneath the tree. She remembered the necklace being placed around her neck. She remembered promising to protect it. And then she remembered something else. A voice from the night of the accident. A voice belonging to someone inside the family. The memory came back with such clarity that she woke before sunrise, breathing heavily, clutching the pendant in her hand. She knew who had been there that night. She knew who had lied. She knew who had taken her away. But the most devastating part was that the person responsible was not a distant enemy. It was someone she had once trusted. When the CEO heard the confession, he struggled to accept it. The person they had suspected had always been close to the family. Someone who had comforted him after the disappearance. Someone who had pretended to help him search. Someone who had repeatedly encouraged him to move on. The betrayal was almost impossible to comprehend. The family member had believed that separating them would protect the company. They had convinced themselves that they were making a necessary sacrifice. But the truth was much darker. They had allowed fear and ambition to destroy innocent lives. The hidden documents were eventually found. The necklace had been the key. Inside the safe deposit box were records that revealed years of financial manipulation. The family's public image had been built on a foundation of secrets, and those secrets were now exposed. The CEO had a choice. He could protect the family name and allow the past to remain buried, or he could reveal everything and accept whatever consequences followed. For a man who had spent his entire life protecting the company, the decision was enormous. He chose the truth. The confession shook the family. Old alliances collapsed. People who had remained silent for years finally spoke. Employees who had suspected something was wrong came forward with evidence. The family's carefully constructed image began to fall apart, not because an enemy had attacked them, but because the truth had become impossible to contain. And through all of it, the woman stood quietly with the necklace around her neck. She was no longer simply the person everyone had tried to protect. She was a witness, a survivor of a past she had never chosen, and someone who deserved to decide what happened next. The CEO eventually met her in the garden where so many of their forgotten memories had begun. The same place where an earlier version of their lives had once seemed simple. There was no grand celebration, no perfect restoration of the past. Instead, there was a quiet moment filled with uncertainty. She touched the necklace. She told him that she still could not remember everything. He told her she did not have to. She looked at him for a long time and admitted that even without remembering every moment, she felt something familiar whenever he was near. Not a memory exactly, but a sense that some part of her recognized the person standing before her. The CEO did not try to turn that feeling into a promise. He simply stayed. And that was what made the moment powerful. The story had begun with a search for someone who had been lost. But it ended with the understanding that finding someone was not the same as restoring the past. The memories might return slowly. Some might never return at all. The wounds created by years of deception would not disappear overnight. The family would have to face the consequences of what had been hidden. The company would have to rebuild its reputation honestly. And the two people at the center of the story would have to discover what their relationship could become without allowing the past to dictate every step. The necklace remained between them, no longer simply a symbol of family wealth or an object connected to a forgotten mystery. It had become proof that the truth could survive even when people tried to erase it. Years of lies had failed. The memories had been damaged, but they had not been completely destroyed. The woman who had once been separated from her own history had found the courage to face it. The CEO who had believed control could protect him had learned that some things could only be healed through patience, honesty, and choice. And the family that had built its power on silence was finally forced to confront the consequences of every secret it had buried. As the evening light faded across the garden, the woman looked down at the necklace one more time. She no longer saw it as a mystery. She saw it as a reminder of everything that had been taken from her and everything she had managed to reclaim. The CEO stood beside her, not demanding the past back, not asking her to remember what she could not remember, but accepting that whatever came next had to be built from the truth. And perhaps that was the real meaning behind the entire story. Sometimes the greatest revelation is not discovering who betrayed you. Sometimes it is discovering that after betrayal, loss, silence, and years of uncertainty, you still have the power to choose your own future. The family secrets were finally exposed. The missing necklace had returned. The lost woman had been found. But the most important thing was that she had finally found herself.